Aloha and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books down from the shelf, dust them off, and remind ourselves why it is we love them. My name's Tom Galley. Joining me today, we've got Tony Pisculi.
Happy to be here, as always.
And today we are talking about one of my favorite books, one of my favorite Phillip K. Dick's, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? This is the book that served the basis for the Bladerunner films.
Yeah, and surprisingly close to the Blade Runner film on reread. I didn't have that impression the first time I read this book.
There's a lot of extraneous stuff in it that Blade Runner does not at all embrace.
Yes.
Yeah, but much of it is thematically the same, at least.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, not the standard question, but it's this. Do you think he came up with the title first and then wrote the book to fit?
You know, yes. yes, I do. I mean, the way that the electric animals are woven through that thing and the significance that that Deckard's electric sheep comes to have.
Yeah.
You know, and the circular nature of his journey through the animals. Mm-hmm. I don't see how that could have just happened. And then him sit back after he had put the last period in and go, now, whatever shall I call this?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think, the fact that he owns a sheep, Deckard literally owns an electric sheep.
Yep.
There's some question over whether Deckard is an android or not. I think that's one of the things that the movie actually improved on, because why do you have this amazing android technology, which they're basically human? You can't distinguish them unless you dig out their bone marrow or you administer this very intensive empathy test. And then meanwhile, all their pets are made out of, wires and metal and stuff. Why are they not just making the animals with this same technology?
That's an interesting question. Now, we do have a moment in the book where somebody has an actual animal that is sick, and they call the fake veterinarians, the technicians, to come pick him up, and the technician can't tell the difference.
Yes.
So he's trying to recharge the poor sick cat, and of course the cat perishes.
Yeah.
That is an interesting contrast there. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why they would not do that.
I think, Phillip K. Dick, I know, so he's one of your favorite authors. You've picked two of his books for the podcast already.
Him and Kurt Vonnegut both. I love their quirky, bizarre outlooks on things and the fabrications that they weave from them.
It is interesting that you say Kurt Vonnegut, because to me, Phillip K. Dick reminds me of no one so much as Kilgore Trout.
Okay.
He's got these wild ideas, which are very, very thought-provoking, and then I find the execution kind of lacking. And so as a story, I'm just most of the time going, and then I'll just be like, just completely enraptured for a chapter of like, the implications of this are incredible. I mean, this is like a deep dive into the philosophy of mind, what it means to be human. And then it's like, but why would they even do this? So,
okay, I can see that.
Yeah. All right. So it's your pick. Why is this one of your favorite? This specifically, of all the Phillip K. Dick novels, why this one?
Well, I had a bit of trepidation going back to this because it's been a while since I read it. And I remember the last time through, which again has been a while, I really had some serious cognitive dissonance trying to reconcile the novel and the film. In particular, this idea that Deckard might be a replicant, which, as far as I'm concerned, is absent in both of them until you get into the later editions of the film. You have a problem when you've got 3 official releases of a film, right? So I didn't know what I was going to think, and I was delighted going back through this. I really did enjoy it. I had forgotten almost entirely about Mercer and Mercerism, but I remembered, and I love the concept of the empty planet slowly devolving into Kipple. The concept of Kipple I just like a lot. I don't know. I think it's a really cool book. And again, there are places that it's clumsy. I'm not going to say that it's perfection, but there are some really big ideas in here, and there are some pretty decent explorations of those, as you said, the repercussions of some of that.
Yeah. I read this book first before the movie came out. I read it in undergrad for some class or other, I forget what. And my takeaway, my impression of it at that time was just bad. I hated it. I was dreading rereading it. I started it. I started a couple of weeks ago, and then it's just like, oh, this is as bad as I remember. And I basically put it off until yesterday.
Okay.
And then I picked it up again, and then I got to the bit where they started administering the test, and it's like, oh, actually, this is better than I remember. Oh, actually, this is really good. Oh, actually, I can't put this down. It just rips from that point. But the whole bit with the mood organ in the beginning and the Mercerism is just like this weird.
Oh, I loved that. Though.
I think thematically it's important, but it's this is where I talk about the clunky execution. I feel like it's so horror. It's so bad science fiction writing, you know. Honey, would you like me to dial you a 667 on the mood organ, which is, pleasant morning? And she's like, no, I'm going to have a 443. Why do you know the numbers? Why?
Because it's what they do. I love the idea that they have this thing that's canned emotional responses. And man, there's a nuanced response for everything.
Yeah, at least 1,000 of them, yeah.
There's slight superiority from experience, and there's a pleasant day at work, and there's well-deserved rest, which I think is at the end of the book.
Yes.
He lies down, she dials him some well-deserved rest, and they even frame a fight around it, because Deckard's wife is being unpleasant, and parallel to this, chapter 1 is dense.
Yes.
We are introduced to a lot in chapter 1. But Deckard's wife is being unpleasant, and he has decided that he's going to force her to be pleasant. He's going to force her to dial something. So he's about to dial venom into the mood organ. And she's like, if you dial venom, I'll dial venom to the max, and we're going to have a fight.
Yeah.
And then he backs off of that. But
I did like the fact that she was depressed. And he's like, but honey, if you just dial whatever, you won't be depressed. And she's like, she doesn't say this in as many words. She's like, I want to be depressed. Yep. I feel sad and I want to feel it. And I don't want to be, boosted out of it with some artificial thing.
Well, she had actually discovered depression as a setting and had consciously decided to set aside, I think it was like 6 hours a week to be depressed.
Yeah.
And she had they actually had mood schedules. They had calendars and they had picked moods for different times of different days.
So what's fascinating about this, and I think it's a mistake structurally to introduce this at the beginning of the book, because it doesn't tie into the plot. It does tie into the theme. So what the big theme with androids, again, physically, they're indistinguishable from human beings until you dig into their bone marrow. But they have no empathy, right? So that's how you can tell. So you administer the void camphor, this other test, which I can't remember the name of, and you determine, this creature in front of me has no empathy. Therefore, they're not human. And that comes back in an interesting way later. But the mood organ is this thing. It's like, well, okay, if humans are the ones with genuine emotions like empathy, then what is the mood organ for?
Right.
Yeah. Are they really, how different are they? How different are the humans of the book from androids if they are living programmed emotional responses? Yeah. And even Mercerism, which is supposed to be this sort of unifying human ritual, is about, distinguishing humans from androids because they can join together in this communal, empathetic response. Turns out to be a fraud. Yeah. So very, very interesting thematically, but just getting dumped on that in chapter 1 is just like,
Yeah. Again, chapter 1 is dense.
Yeah.
A lot of big ideas thrown at us with very little explanation. And
yeah.
we have to unpack them through the rest of the book.
Yeah. It's not clear to me. It's very clear in the movie why the replicants are a threat, and it's a lot less clear why the androids of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep are a threat.
They do a poor job of that.
Yeah.
It is one thing to ask, and it's something I don't think enough people do ask. Why is it such a bad thing that they have come here?
Yeah.
In a way, I think part of it is just the whole runaway slave idea, because they are property. They are supposed to be doing something unpleasant in service to mankind,
Yeah.
and they've run away.
Well, and they murdered people to get that opportunity. So they are murderers.
Well, they are indeed murderers, and we can punish them for that. But the bias against them definitely goes deeper
yes.
than that. And Deckard even, at one point, Rachel is in fear for her life. She's like, you can't kill me. I haven't broken any laws. I'm property. I belong to the corporation. Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, they'll probably find me.
Yeah. Yeah, property destruction. Yeah, that's not a capital crime. There's a line somewhere where he's working on retiring Luba Luft, I think is her name.
The opera singer?
The opera singer, yeah. And she's such an amazing singer. And he goes, what a shame. I mean, how could such a talented singer be a threat? Why is removing this incredibly talented singer from the planet a good thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of his empathy for the androids.
Yes. Yeah.
Which threatens to derail him.
For the hot ones.
Anyway, right, yeah.
He has a whole moment where he goes, yeah, I've got empathy for attractive female androids, but not for any other androids. Yeah.
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 So the world, I love the idea of the world, right? They had, what was it, World War Terminus?
Yeah.
And then the Earth became effectively uninhabitable. So everyone who could left.
Yeah.
And, nobody who's left behind is happy about being left behind.
No.
And they are degrading. I mean, lead cod pieces are all the fashion, trying to keep the radioactive dust from degenerating your genes. But people deteriorate, and apparently the police issue intelligence tests periodically. And if you fail the test, you become you become a chicken head.
Chicken head, yeah. Or an ant head, I guess. Which
ant head is even further down, yeah. There was we have a chicken head who befriends our wayward androids, but we're privy to his thoughts. And at one point, he's come home from his job, and he says, and this is quoting his thoughts, right? I wish, he thought painfully, that I could get another job. If I hadn't failed that IQ test, I wouldn't be reduced to this ignominious task with its attendant emotional byproducts. This is the thought process of a chicken head.
Yeah.
Right, which it's just speaking to that whole, what is this line, right? What is the line between functional and special? What's the line between human and android?
And it's interesting because, he discovers the androids in his apartment, and he, as a human, is supposed to turn them in, but he aligns with them because he feels more sympathy for them because they are similarly excluded from society the way he feels he is.
Yep.
Which is a risk of having, excluding people from your society. They feel like they no longer participate, and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to be on the side of the people who are railing against society. Yeah.
Well, that, and they're people, right? He has been living alone in an apartment complex meant for thousands, as one does on the empty earth, right?
Yeah.
And he is so delighted. He's in his apartment, and he hears the TV coming on from a couple floors down. So he has to run down there, and he's trying to think, what do you do when you introduce yourself and you knock at the door? You take a gift. So he grabs a cube of margarine because it's the only thing he has in the house to go run down. And it's Pris who's moved into that empty apartment, thinking it was an empty building.
Pris, who is not nearly as charming as Daryl Hannah.
Who is?
Yeah.
That was Daryl Hannah in her prime.
Yeah. In terms of her character, she was very sweet to JR in the film, and this Pris is very not. I mean, none of them are.
Well, I kind of like that because they're sitting there having a matter-of-fact discussion about should we just kill him in front of him, and then they vote on it. Yeah. And they end up voting not to kill him because of pragmatism. Yeah. And yet he's still like, hey, I'm with the androids.
Yeah. There's an interesting question that's asked early on and then explored a couple of times, and it doesn't really come to any good resolution, or maybe I missed something in reading this. But the idea of using androids as bounty hunters, because as a human being, you're retiring androids, but they look functionally like people. You administer a test that says, no, there's not actually a person legally, technically, but of course in every other way but their empathy and their bone marrow, they are people. And they have a will to live, and they feel pain. They are sentient creatures, and you are murdering them. With the approval of the state, but still, you're committing murder. And they talk about how that's not really. I mean, that's a tough job for most people. And Deckard implies very distancing mechanisms until he gets to the point where he's over it. But it would make a lot of sense to use androids as bounty hunters. And so that comes up a couple of times whether Deckard is an android and whether this other guy, Resh, is an android. And then in both cases, no, it's not. And it's so weird. Why aren't they androids?
I don't know. I mean, the idea of using androids to kill androids, that certainly seems plausible enough.
Yeah.
And we've established throughout the book that androids have absolutely no loyalty
Right.
to anyone but themselves.
Yeah, even to other androids.
Yeah, especially to other androids.
Yeah.
They're happy to sell out other androids if it means their own safety, and kill other androids if it means their own survival.
Yeah.
The idea that, what was his name, Resh?
Resh, yeah.
Deckard was convinced he had to be an android. He had to be an android, and then he wasn't an android, and that was devastating to him. The idea that this person who he found so abhorrent was actually human.
I had a different problem with Resh not being an android, which was that he worked in a fake police station, and every other employee of the fake police station was an android.
Now, we don't ever explicitly get that everyone in there was an android, but they do have their own shadow police force, their own shadow police station.
Yeah.
And they are sending them out to retire other androids, which again speaks of that lack of loyalty.
Yes. Yeah.
But this is a way in which they're hiding. Now, one of the very few, I don't know what to call it, detail issues I have with this, though, is the androids that we're hunting, this particular pack of, I think it was originally 6?
8.
8?
8, because the first guy retires 2 of them, and then Deckard retires 6 in one day.
Right.
Yeah.
But they came from Mars
Yeah.
a few months ago.
Yeah.
And Resh remembers them being there
For years. Yes.
Which is one of the things that made everyone question, hey, maybe he's got fake memories.
Yeah.
You can't give fake memories to a human. So that's a detail that bothered me. Since he turned out to be human, but his memory is wrong, there's got to be a disconnect there.
There was sort of a sop to that, and it's like, I think it was Garfield who was the police chief of the Shadow Station. Is that his name?
Something close to that.
Yeah. And I think they conclude that there was a real Garfield, and the android came in and killed the real Garfield and took his place.
He took his place. That's right. That's right.
So he could have been there for years. They just sort of invaded like pod people. Although I don't know how that works because it wouldn't have looked like the original police chief. So
plus he was just lucky.
Yeah.
Or the original police chief had been an android as well, the same model.
Possibly, yeah. Another reason androids should be bounty hunters is because the Nexus 6, they have faster reflexes than human beings, right?
They're supposed to be better. And Deckard was really, really concerned about whether or not he could kill, was it Ray or Roy?
Roy, yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah.
And it ended up kind of being a anticlimactic.
Nothing like the fight in the movie.
No, and that was epic in the movie. That was epic.
Although, okay, reading this book not reminded me, but made me aware of a flaw in the movie, which is, Deckard goes to all this trouble to retire these escaped androids. And then as he's in the process of losing to Roy Beatty and not killing him successfully, Roy Beatty dies because his time is up.
Right.
So it's like, why were you retiring these guys at all? You could have just waited for a week and they all would have dropped dead. Why does this movie exist?
Okay, that thought never crossed my mind. Yep, that was it. Good point. Because he wanted the bounty. And that's what drives our protagonist in the book, is he's after the money so that he can buy a replacement animal, right?
Yeah.
His live sheep died and he secretly replaced it with an electric sheep because of the social stigma of not having a live animal.
Yeah. Yeah, which brings me to another issue that I have with the book, which is like, I find all these characters repugnant. Yeah,
There's not a lot likable in here.
The relationship between Deckard and his wife, Deckard as an individual, all of the androids who have far less sympathy than the replicants in the movie. The only one I feel any kind of, sympathy for is JR, this poor little chicken head who's trying to get by and needs a friend.
He is without a doubt the most likable character in the book.
All right. Chapter 10. I don't know if you have printed notes there. I feel like you're cheating.
I'm still working out the kinks to my new note-taking system with my Kindle Scribe.
Okay. Chapter 10 is where this book really takes off for me. So this is when, and again, it's like this whole weird dance of Deckard goes to retire Luba Luft, goes into her dressing room, administers the test, or starts to administer the test. She deflects him very nicely.
She deflects him very nicely and very legitimately.
Yes.
Because a lot of the, he asks these questions and, she's like, well, what is this thing you're talking about? And it's like, well, that makes sense because it's been 70 years since the World War. I mean, there are people that have no idea what a mouse is or whatever.
And also her native language is German. And so she goes, I only know opera in English to sing it. I only know English to sing opera, so I don't have a very large vocabulary. So he'll ask her some really provocative question to get an emotional response, and she will go, oh, what is, I don't know, pornography or whatever the word is that he says. And by the time he's explained it to her, the emotional response, the window for an emotional response is gone. And she goes, I understand. That's a new word for me. Okay. What was the question?
It's beautiful.
It's so good.
And then she calls the police on him.
Yes, which is great. And then obviously, because she's obviously an android, the cop is obviously an android, and they're in cahoots, which is fascinating. And then just a bunch of, and so that setup is great. This is the kind of thing that Philip K. Dick does so well. Sets up this great thing where it's like, how do I, as a human being, prove that I'm a human being? But they're androids; they don't care. But then the question is, why do they bother to continue the charade past that point? You have a police officer with a gun, just shoot him and dispose of the body.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a whole, because they take him to their shadow police headquarters and they introduce him to their shadow police chief.
Yes.
Here's why I question the whole, it's all androids, because they send the body of the replicant he had retired earlier, who he's been driving around with a headless corpse in his car for like 2 chapters now. Yeah. But they send that down to the lab and it comes back as an android.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely nothing. If that was a 100% android facility, there's no reason it would further their cover to admit that.
That's a good point. So they probably just have a couple of key positions because Garfield is one of the ones that comes from Mars, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But they have enough of them that they've got the outgoing phone calls tapped, right? Because Deckard tries to call his wife and he can't get through to her. You see, now, and this is the moment where they start trying to convince him that he's an android.
Yeah, which is great, which is very Philip K. Dickian.
It is. Yeah. But see, that's the only point. The only time anyone accuses Deckard of being an android is when they're androids trying to protect their own identity. It doesn't emerge thematically. At least I don't see it emerging anywhere else in the book other than androids trying to play head games with him.
Not that he specifically is, but there's some back and forth with Resch about how I think androids would make better bounty hunters.
Yeah, and I think both of those people suspect the other one of being not human.
But then Resch actually suspects himself of being an android.
He does.
And he's quite distressed about it. Yeah.
Yep.
And it was a real shock to me when Deckard says, "Nope, no, you're not." I was like, what's happening right now? That doesn't make sense to me. He's obviously an android, but okay, all right, we'll go that way. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember early days of online, and the only movie that I had seen was the original theatrical release. And then somebody makes this offhand comment about whether or not Deckard's an android. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's absolutely nothing in that film to suggest that Deckard is a replicant, and there's not. I stand by that.
There's one clue, and it's very subtle, and it doesn't. It's not overt, and you have to know some of the outside lore of the production. But Edward James Olmos's character, who I forget, who's always making these little figures out of messes.
He sets the unicorn down.
The unicorn, yeah.
But the unicorn has no significance because in the original theatrical release, there are no dream sequences.
Yes, correct.
So what that said to me, we're moving off, but he always left those little origamis behind. What that said to me is, this is a message to Deckard that I have been in your apartment and I have not killed Rachel.
Yeah.
So if you get out of here, you will live.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with Deckard's identity.
Yeah.
And then even in the director's release, which was a far better film, they got rid of the gumshoe narrative, those dream sequences weren't in there.
Interesting.
It wasn't until the ultimate release, I think that's what they actually called it, but there was a third official release that those stupid slow motion unicorn scenes got stuck back in. And now you could conceivably infer that Deckard is having a dream and that the guy knew what his dream was. So yeah,
because it was a false memory.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, I maintain that in the book, other than the other androids playing head games, you don't have that. There's no point in there that his wife doesn't think he's an android, his other boss doesn't think he's an android.
Other than just the general uncertainty of everything in a Philip K. Dick
Yeah, I
novel.
mean, you could throw it out there. But he's able to join Mercer. He doesn't like doing it, but he's able to do it.
That's true. And he is, and also he is married. Why, if you're going to have an android bounty hunter, why give them a wife also, unless she's also an android? You're not going to put them with a human wife. But then his wife could be an android too. Who knows? I don't know. It's just...
I mean, it could get really deep. But then you start questioning, what's the advantage of an android not knowing it's an android? Hey, you're an android. Your job is to kill other androids. This is your programming. You're not going to deviate from it.
I forget now. Does Rachel know she's an android from the get-go?
Rachel does, in fact, know she's an android.
Okay, because in the film
from
she
get-go.
doesn't.
No.
That's a shock to her.
It's a shock to her. And that leads to one of the scenes in the film that, not so great.
Not a great scene.
But yeah, Rachel does know in the novel, although she pretends not to.
Yes. Okay, that's
right.
what
They maintain the fiction through the initial testing
Yeah.
that she doesn't know.
Yeah.
It gets to the point where Deckard is questioning the Voight-Kampff test.
Yeah.
And then as he's about to leave in defeat, hey, I'll ask her one more question, right?
Yeah.
And he hits her with the grandmother of all questions. I don't even remember what it was. It wasn't all that
My
impressive.
wallet
but-
is made of baby skin or something like that.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Voight-Kampff test, one of the things that was very interesting in the novel, which they don't explore in the movie at all, was the idea that if you're measuring empathy, what happens if you run across a human who doesn't have empathy for whatever reason? And they singled out schizophrenics as the population here, but there's a number of people who wouldn't demonstrate normal empathetic response to questions, which are perfectly human people that we don't want to go around killing. Yeah, so...
I mean, it was a nice philosophical debate with many other ones in the book. I don't know. I mean, if you were to find another human who was actually devoid of empathy, maybe retiring them by mistake isn't the worst thing that could happen.
Unless you are
Is that a
human.
non-empathetic thing to say?
Yeah, wow. Unless you're that human or their family member. Yeah.
Yeah. Surely it's an issue, but what does they say? The balance of probability, right? This has to be somebody that has fallen under suspicion to the point that the police are administering the test.
Wow, that's not enough of defense for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it could be legitimately sketch,
Yeah.
It's like saying, hey, don't worry about being accused of a crime because you'll be tried by a jury of your peers.
Yeah.
I have been on a few juries of peers, and it is
That's dicey.
dicey.
Yeah, you don't want to put your fate in the hands of 12 strangers. No.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting philosophically because, again, so there's a couple of key differences between androids and humans. So bone marrow, which is irrelevant, okay?
Right.
It's just the ultimate physical determiner. I mean, you pretty much have to be dead first before you can start digging around in your bone marrow. And then there's the lack of empathy, which is one of the things that does make them dangerous because they will kill without compulsion. But other than that, and they have short lifespans because they're engineered, and there's no way the cell reproduction doesn't work.
Right.
So they just die out after a few years. But other than that, they are indistinguishable from humans, right? So if you're saying it's the lack of empathy is the definitive test, then yeah, maybe human beings without empathy are also essentially androids, and therefore not deserving to live, which is, I think, not a good conclusion to draw. But I think he raises that possibility. He throws it out there.
He does. And empathy, I think, is probably a relatively advanced reaction. How much empathy does a typical 6-year-old have? I don't spend a lot of time around 6-year-olds, so I don't know the answer to this. Maybe it's a high, maybe it's a low thing. But I mean, I could see, androids are created and turned on, and they know what knowledge they've been given, and they're sent out to do a job. Empathy might be something that if they lived more than 6 years and weren't treated as
that's a good point.
awful
They're all
laborers,
basically children.
They're all basically children who exist because there are jobs people don't want to do.
Yeah.
Right. So it may well be they're capable of empathy, and the new movie tries to explore that.
2049.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Buster Friendly and his friends.
Oh no, Buster Friendly.
This is something that I remember this bothering me from the first time I read it.
Yeah.
Right. So he's a TV talk show host and a radio talk show host. And there's a channel that's Buster friendly 24/7. It never stops. And there's a radio station that's Buster friendly 24/7. It never stops. And they're not the same content. And it never seems to occur to anyone to seriously ask the question, how does Buster friendly do this? Deckard wonders every once in a while, because he's had a guest on that he liked, and the guest has been on there for 3 days.
24/7 for 3 days, yeah.
But then these people who clearly can't be human, their big expose is that Mercerism is fabricated.
Yeah. It's weird that Buster Friendly attacks Mercerism because they both seem like arms of the state. Yeah. And maybe Mercerism is not. It's not explicit what Mercerism is, and not everyone subscribes to it, but almost everybody does. I mean, it's like being Mormon in Utah. So, you're immersed in it, whether you're a believer or not. So it really feels like a state religion to me.
Well, and even if you don't subscribe to it, even if you don't grab the handles and commune, you're still a captive of it, because the entire thing about animals, about keeping animals alive, is a facet of Mercerism.
Yeah. But then you've got this Buster Friendly character who feels like a state-sponsored show, right? And yet they're attacking each other, which is weird. So maybe they're not.
I don't know what Buster Friendly gains by going after Mercerism. If the idea is to discredit it because Buster has to be a replicant, there's or android, I guess they call them in the book. There's nothing else that they can be to keep that up. Then maybe by discrediting the one thing, the one unifying bond that humans have that separates them from the androids, he's trying to strike a civil rights blow for the android kind.
Well, that would lend credence to the conspiracy theory that, Buster Friendly is an android, is how he's able to maintain his insane schedule. And they just replace him with a new one every 4 years when he burns out, because we know that they make models. Rachel and Pris are the same model, same chassis, just different hair. Yeah, Buster Friendly was weird. But you know what? Mercerism is even weirder. Yeah, it is a strange, strange religion. And, Deckard at one point becomes Mercer, like he doesn't merge with Mercer. He just like...
Okay, that was weird. That was Phillip K. Dick going off the deep end. I don't know, he took a little too much before he wrote that chapter. That was weird. Yeah,
that was very, very strange. He gets psychedelic in a couple places, and that was one. It's just like, and this is after the plot has concluded. All the androids are dead. Yeah,
all the androids are dead. He has bought a goat.
Yep.
Which Rachel killed.
Yeah.
And he's basically emotionally collapsing in on himself. And he becomes Mercer.
Yeah. It's such a strange coda to the book. It's like, this must be important, It's like, this is your conclusion. You've got this story, and then it's like the last chapter of, was it Clockwork Orange?
We're not going to let that go. That was a mistake.
Yeah.
But while he's Mercer, he's also talking to Mercer.
Yeah.
And he's like, is it true that you're a fake? And then he's like, of course it's true, I'm a fake.
Yeah.
And of course it's true, they're fakes.
Yeah.
It's not about being real.
Yeah. I did like that. I think, to whatever extent there's value in religion, I think the value in religion is independence of the reality of the religion.
Yeah.
I think you could derive a lot of value from Christianity or Buddhism or whatever without there being an actual Christian God or a legitimate, enlightened Buddha, just by having a set of rules to live by. I think there's value in that. And that's one of the themes of Stranger in a Strange Land, right?
Yeah. Which we will get around to.
I'm sure we will. Fosterism. Is Fosterism a real religion? Doesn't matter. Yeah, it's real enough. It's as real as any other religion, so why not? And then Michael Valentine Smith makes his own religion, So I do like this idea that Mercerism doesn't have to be real to be valuable, and that Mercer is the first one to be willing to call, acknowledge the falseness of it. I just don't know what Dick is doing with this.
Yeah. That is a good question.
Yeah.
I like when they're having that conversation, Deckard and Mercer having that conversation, and Mercer says something along the lines of, the androids have exposed me, and they're never going to understand why it's not going to change anything. Because like you said, it's not about it being real, it's about it being a shared belief. About the androids don't understand what it is, so their attempt to destroy it is going to be non-effectual.
Yeah. So, in short, very typical Philip K. Dick book. Just wild ideas, wild ride.
Very complex.
Mind expanding, uneven.
Uneven. I like that. That's a really good term for it.
Yeah.
Uneven.
Yeah. He wrote, okay, so you've now recommended 2 Philip K. Dick books for the podcast. He wrote 36 novels, which is which is a larger number than I suspected, because I can only think of like 3 or 4 off the top of my head. I am wondering how much Philip K. Dick have you read, and then where does this one rank in the pantheon?
I see. I'm going to go on a limb and say I've read 3 or 4. I get Vonnegut and Dick confused, so I forget who wrote which books. Man in the High Castle.
That's Dick.
Is Dick.
Yeah.
So I think, what was the other one that we did already?
We did we did Scanner Darkly.
Scanner Darkly.
Yeah.
We did Cat's Cradle too, didn't we?
We did. And we did Slaughterhouse 5.
I think that Scanner Darkly is probably my favorite.
Interesting.
And it may just be that I empathize with the message more in that one than in any of the others. Yeah, but this one's up there. This one's in my top 4. How about that?
Top 4 of the 4 you've read?
Of the 4 names I can remember reading, it's in the top 4.
Well, just by podcast, we could probably guess that it's number 2. Yeah, because it's the second one you picked.
That's a good metric, yeah.
Okay.
Just back to Buster Friendly real quickly. It reminded me very much that relationship of the mass public to the Buster Friendly of Fahrenheit 451. Where they had the family on the TV walls. Mm-hmm. And then one of the things you could do is you could buy an interactive module so you could actually have conversations with the TV family. And that was what people did. They stayed at home and watched the TV walls and watched the family.
I wonder how far away we are from that. I mean, I don't know if there's a demand for that content yet, but we can generate, video. We've got LLMs to generate the conversation, respond in real time.
I have... In the last month, the amount of time I have spent talking with ChatGPT has probably quintupled.
Yeah.
I'm finding more and more things that it is actually well suited for.
It's pretty good.
And I'm also beginning to try things that it's probably not well suited for. And again, just feeling out what is it and what isn't it. But yeah, I don't think it would be very long. I mean, if I can actually sit there and have conversations with the thing.
You can't. Have you not tried the voice mode on ChatGPT?
No, I have not.
There's a voice mode. You can just talk to it and it will respond.
You see, I tend to avoid, so far I've tended to avoid, I avoid Siri, I avoid talking to Google unless I need to, I avoid talking to my Amazon or my Alexa unless I need to. I've been avoiding conversating with inanimate objects. But I'll give it a shot and see what happens.
That's interesting. That's very Harry Potter. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. Isn't that, you said you're reading the first book. Isn't the first book the one, did you not get to this part yet?
Well, from what I can tell, the book is strongly paralleling the film, so I don't think there are spoilers.
Okay. So Ginny starts writing in a diary, and the diary starts writing back to her. I believe that's in the first book.
Okay, I remember.
And it's Voldemort's diary. And just never have a conversation.
I feel like that's the second book.
Is it the
second book? I don't think it's in the first film.
Okay, could be the
but
second
whatever.
one.
But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So be very wary of objects that are intelligent. Yeah. Yes.
Or swords with ego.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but ChatGPT's got a voice mode now. It's kind of amazing. So when I have some more free time, I will be trying to use it as a Russian tutor. You can talk to it and say, hey, have a conversation with me in Russian. I need to work on these verbs. And it will just go. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing for that kind of stuff.
I could see becoming reliant on this thing very easily, very quickly.
There is a trend on Twitter right now where people are using Claude, which is another LLM from a company called Anthropic, which has a sort of a more of a personality. ChatGPT is almost by design absent of personality. It's just got sort of a general enthusiasm to it. Mm-hmm. Claude's got more of a personality. And people are using Claude as a therapist. So they're saying, Claude, I'm feeling like this right now. And it's like, well, why do you think you feel that way? Blah, 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 blah. And they have a conversation with Claude and they feel better. And it's just like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that.
That is spooky.
Yeah. I mean, that's gonna be great until it's not, and it's like, Claude is like, yeah, well, I don't know, maybe you should kill yourself.
Seems logical, yeah. First dial 442 on the mood organ. And
yeah.
I think we've drifted off a little
We
bit.
have. We live in interesting times is the point.
That is a good point, yeah.
All right. Anything else on Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yep, I love it. It's a good book. I really enjoyed it. It is not without its problems,
Yeah.
but it reinforces some of the things that some of the problems I did have with the first two releases of Blade Runner as well.
I am delighted to read this again because, like I say, my first impression of it, 30 whatever years ago was extremely negative, and all I've remembered from that initial reread was the mood organ in the beginning and the hallucinatory passages at the end. And so just like, oh, what a trash book. But then this was so fun, especially the stuff when we get into the Voight Camp stuff and the Shadow Police Station and that, which reminded me very much of The City in the City by China Miéville, that whole thing. It was just riveting, and it was big philosophical. This is what I come to science fiction for, is these big philosophical ideas. And let's let you chew on these for a bit and see how they play out in actual circumstances. And I wish the execution was a little better because some of the human motivation through that section is sketchy at best to set up the scene. But it was really, really fun. Yeah. So it's very much redeemed in my eyes.
Excellent. All right. Well, what are we going to do next?
Oh, next we're going to do another Zelazny novel. We did Nine Princes in Amber a while back, and now we're going to do Road Marks, which is just a surreal adventure.
I do not know this one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. I hope so.
All right. Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.